Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of the Themes and Variations podcast with me, Toby Harris.
And me, Emily Reed.
This is a very special episode today because we are looking at a film called Follow Me, and we're looking at that because today is, in fact, the third annual Aldous Huxley Day.
Yes, Huxley Day is an interesting one because Aldous Huxley, he passed away on the 22nd of November, on the same day as the assassination of Kennedy and also the death of C.S. Lewis. There was, in fact, a somewhat interesting novel to this very effect that imagined the three of them in the same room in purgatory, talking about life, the universe, and everything, which I have, in fact, yet to read, but it is an interesting idea.
There's a lot of competition, isn't it, for this day?
Yeah.
Like what a day to die on. He really picked a busy day.
He picked a busy day, yes, yeah.
But the Aldous Huxley Day is going to be celebrated with programming, with lectures, activities, and workshops and so on at the Aldous Huxley Centre in Zurich. And this podcast episode is all about looking on the relevance of Huxley to the now, but actually through this particular really special project, which was undertaken by students at the whole school, which is associated, of course, with the Huxley Centre. So do you want to tell us a bit about the film?
Yes, so the film is called Follow Me, and it is broadly inspired by Brave New World, but it takes Brave New World and puts it into a much more modern and contemporary era, which produces, as we will discover, some really interesting effects. It was devised and starring students from the whole school. Some of us are, in fact, on the call with us today, and we're very excited to talk to them, under the guidance of Zurich Film School. And it was, in fact, shown at Zurich Film Festival this year, which is very exciting indeed. So I think it's probably worth at this point just introducing everybody who is here, because we have a few new faces on the podcast today. So
this is the busiest one we've done.
It is.
Yeah.
Very exciting times for the podcast.
Who knows what's going to happen?
So why don't we just go around the call and just introduce ourselves and our roles in the film, whether that was devising the film or starring in the film.
I'm Dr. James Isaacs. I teach at Hull School music and English literature and English language, and I oversee the film video world. So doing this project, which was Robert Hall's idea, I was aware of Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves, where he said it was Huxley, not Orwell, who really foresaw the world we were in. And I sort of suggested possibly a tie-in with cell phone obsession. So I'll just pass this around the clock to Ava Kortz.
Well, my name is Ava Kortz. I am a third-year student at Hull School, and I acted in the film, and I played the character Mother.
Yeah, my full legal name is Nadezhda Kravets, but you can call me Nadia or Nad. And I was the main writer of the film.
Yeah, my name's Lynn Blume. I kind of did a lot of different things, but my main thing was I was one of the directors, and also I did the main camera work.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much.
So officially, the film is described as depicting a society where life doesn't exist outside of social media. And the main character girl grows up hoping for her savior, the new coming. One day in a forest, she meets a boy, I believe he's named Guy, who has lived away from society and hasn't been brought up in the normal way. And she believes she has found her savior. However, the more she draws the boy into her world, the clearer it becomes that the long-awaited salvation may be, in fact, her true downfall. Follow Me is a short film created by teens for teens. That's what I have. What do you have, Nadia?
I wrote a very short blurb instead because I'm not a massive fan of revealing all the plot information straight off.
Yeah.
So what I wrote was just stranding off from her usual way of life by near accident. Girl does not expect her entire world to shift so drastically.
I mean, we want people to watch the film as a result of listening to this podcast. So I think the idea was that we would show maybe a short clip of one of the early scenes and then show some discussion around it, but then finish by asking you guys where people can go to watch the film, how they might engage with it.
Don't worry. We only want what's best for you. You know that, right?
Hello, darling. What have you been up to lately?
We would never contact you if we weren't sure. I didn't even know what she would hear this blasphemy. She's seriously saying that the new comic is not real. I'm worried about her. She must be so confused, and I know you can help us. This will be better for her, for you to convince her that he does exist and that he truly is somewhere out there. Please, please convince her that the new comic is real. Please, and do not tell her we told you. Please don't.
But that's my best friends. They're just joking. You know I would never. I wouldn't. You seem in doubt, dear. You understand. We cannot have you saying the wrong words. Perhaps a week of shadow ban will give you time to think in solitary.
No. Smile. I'll take the smile.
We wanted to start though by asking a few questions to everyone about this opening scene.
Yeah, so I imagine that this is probably, because it's an early scene in the film, it's probably a good one to discuss without spoiling the film for anyone who does want to watch it. So we're thinking specifically about the opening scene where the girl, the protagonist, she's taken to see a couple of characters called Mother and Father. So there's like a few really interesting things I felt when watching the scene, which it'd be really good to get your take and opinions on. I think one of the things that was particularly interesting was the language being used. So she's forced to, as a kind of punishment, she's forced to choose between a shadow ban and a smile. So I was just wondering whether you'd be able to speak a little bit more about the significance of a shadow ban. What is the smile? Because without giving too much away, the smile is almost like a medicine that is administered to the girl. I was just curious to know what the significance maybe of these terms are. So maybe what is the shadow ban? What is the smile? Where does this language come from?
Yeah, early on kind of writing this specific scene, I wanted to introduce the language of social media and more modern slang terms into it. So shadow ban felt like the obvious thing because, first of all, it sounds vaguely menacing for the unknowing person. If you know what it is, I think it encapsulates the themes of the movie very well, because what shadow ban is on social media is when you go against the social media website's policy, maybe not in very strict terms so that you get your account banned, but just a little things. And then what the social media website will do is moderate your account in a way where you do not receive engagement. So they will not push you into the algorithm of the people. Even people who are your followers will not see your posts unless they seek them out. So I see posts all the time like, guys, oh my God, am I shadow banned? What do I do? How do I get out of here? Because people crave the interaction. People crave the attention that social media gives you. And even disappearing from the public eye for a week or so is it feels like a punishment to them. So I thought that would be interesting to add in there. And then the smile, I don't think it was called smile in kind of the first draft, but then we decided to just simplify it for first-time viewers. And I guess it reflects this almost toxic positivity that we see on social media. The pressure to appear smiling and on the top of your life all the time. And we see here that it's enforced essentially.
I always remember one big thing when we were writing or like kind of creating the idea was we didn't want it to feel detached like a lot of things do about teens. It's written from people that are a lot older and it's like usually pretty cringy. So we tried to get it as close to reality as we could. And that was like a big point for us.
And then that use of that term shadow ban does seem to evoke that. Yeah, as a slightly older person, it's not something that I'm really that aware of or something that I feel. But it seemed like shadow ban is interesting as a concept because of the paranoia involved in the idea of being shadow banned. Because has your friend seen your post and decided not to like it and ignore it as sending a message, or have you been shadow banned? So it's almost like the individual in social media has been dissipated a bit, like into the system, into the program, right, surrounding them, which obviously the film does a really good job of showing.
I think in the scene as well, one of the things I did also find quite interesting was the character of the mother and the father, even the names of mother and father. These are the titles that we give to people who are meant to care for us, people who are meant to love us, people who want to wrap us up and protect us. But in fact, these characters are the very ones who are perpetuating the harm. So Eva is the person who played the mother figure. Like, how is that to play a kind of a character who on the surface level is someone who cares, but fundamentally is someone who harms?
It's a very complex thing to get right because you have to really convince people that like you care for them and that you want what's best for them at all times, because that society is convinced that mother and father are actually their like parental figures because they didn't grow up with parents and because it's just not normal. That's why we call them mother and father, because they're supposed to care for you and they want what's best for you. But as you see throughout the movie, it's a little bit deeper than that. And they have this really thought out plan for everything that could go wrong in their world. And they have a solution for everything. And mother, I think she never stops thinking. She's always planning ahead. She's always one step ahead of everyone else. And if she sees that something's about to go wrong, she knows and she's gonna take action right away, but she's gonna do it in a way that seems that she cares for you and that seems that she really wants what's best for you.
Yeah, and it is interesting actually that term mother as well, because for readers of Brave New World, which is the basis, one of the key inspirations for the film, the words mother and father are actually taboo words. They're kind of seen as these dirty words that almost can't be written down. The very idea of a mother and a father is disgusting. Instead, they have like controllers, which is the terminology that they use. So it was very interesting as someone who's read Brave New World to see the reintroduction of these terms into the scripts.
I think for those terms specifically, in preparation for writing, I think the first or the second draft, I watched a lot of cult documentaries, and I noticed kind of this tendency for cult leaders to create this parasocial relationship. Whereas in Brave New World, it's very much about kind of dominance and empowerment in the word controller, so the one who controls you. They're not even trying to hide it, I mean. But with kind of modern cults, it's all about, oh, this person cares for you. Oh, this person wants what's best for you. And also, obviously, kind of having been raised Catholic, a father is where my mind obviously goes immediately when I need to think of a person of power over me in this kind of spiritual almost setting.
I think it's a really good point, because if we're, as James mentioned in the Neil Postman book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, it's obvious that Brave New World is so relevant to now, because the means of control it depicts are a kind of, appears to be a kind of benevolent dictatorship. People are controlled through pleasure, through desire, and of course through the ubiquitous use of technology and drugs, you know, like the feelies, the different amusements they have, and the availability of these narcotics that help them to feel better. But I also think, in terms of that relevance of Huxley to now, because it is written in the early 1930s, it does seem like quite a spiky world from our perspective, you know, like in terms of personal interactions, gender relationships, technology. It's kind of, you know, this is clearly a world that's different to our own. And so I really like what you've just said there, because I think Follow Me is trying to translate that sense of control into something that kind of, even though it's kind of the atmosphere of the film's very insipid and paranoid and unsettling, there is that sense of this kind of sugar-coated cuddliness around everything, which I really do get from interactions with modern technology, where the apps are coaxing you constantly to interact with these heart symbols, these likes, these smiley faces. So is that seems to be part of the motivation by bringing these characters in a bit more as a mother and a father.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things that I notice as well is the as well as the almost like this soft coaxing around use of technology, also the kind of the jingoistic nature of language as well. Maybe this is like, because my background as a linguist, but what is the jingo in the film? It's, what is it?
Smile wider, shine brighter.
Smile wider, shine brighter. And again, in Brave New World, this jingoistic language is everywhere. It ties to this idea of almost what we call like prefabricated language. So like language that sounds good, that has a rhythm to it, that is easily repeated and almost becomes like a meme that everybody repeats. And it, for me, signals the power of like language and jingos and these snappy sentences to actually control people's behavior at a much deeper level.
And on that note, I wanted to ask, there's quite a clever use of sort of internal voices in the film. There's points at which the girl's Neuralink device is broken, and there's this kind of like parody electronic voice that's kind of saying it's broken. But then sometimes the voice will interject other elements that kind of fuel the plot, almost like subliminal messages. And so I wonder, maybe Lynn, if you wanted to reflect a bit on how the use of sound in the building up of the film helps to convey that message.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of idea behind that was we wanted to simulate this constant stream of notifications and like not being able to turn it off. As we see in a later scene where it's like at night, you still get these notifications. It's very intense. It's very overwhelming. So you kind of never really get a rest from them. And even though you don't hear them all the time, they're supposed to be there all the time, because it's kind of like, yeah, you can't really turn off notifications that you get through social media, especially. And so our idea was also that it kind of, the Neuralinks, because they're like this really big controlling part of the society as well, they know what the aims of the society are. And that's why it kind of can give this input on to girl, like as one scene, I can't really spoil it, but the Neuralink kind of tells her what to do because it knows what would be in the interest of mother and father and the interest of the society. And so it kind of tells her that through this digital world, and it's right in her brain and nobody else really hears it.
So that's quite an interesting and insidious idea, isn't it? Because in that scene, the Neuralink is barking away that the connection's been broken, and it's quite overwhelming. a bit like that scene when it's also telling her that when she's trying to sleep and it's telling her she needs to relax, which is the perfect metaphor for the way that you've got your phone next to you when you're sleeping and it's like got a blue screen and the notifications are happening. It's stopping you from relaxing, even though it's supposed to be a tool to relax with.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it's broken, it's not totally broken. And still, it always kind of finds a way to be there and finds a way to kind of unsettle girl, especially.
So, this being an Aldous Huxley podcast and Follow Me being a film that is based on Brave New World, I think I wanted to ask a question about the process of translating Brave New World into the modern. So I don't know if any of you wanted to share your thoughts and experiences on maybe if you read Brave New World, what stood out to you about Brave New World, and when thinking about Brave New World in the making, the writing, the acting of this film, like where you feel the connections perhaps lie?
Yeah, I mean, as in translating Brave New World kind of to modern terms, we took a very broad approach to it, as in we took the central idea of pleasure controlling a society, and we tried to think of it in more modernistic terms. Well, obviously, we can't show a bunch of teenagers doing drugs. We went with this idea of social media and how it controls our lives. And I think if you take this angle of social media, it's very interesting to try and kind of compare and contrast how Huxley depicts society in Brave New World and how social media is in our reality, because Huxley's version almost becomes this parody of a parody, because of the thing that comes to my mind is how people on the outskirts of society are they're described as like wild beasts, and they're like not involved in anything, and they're living the old way. Like the idea of like a noble savage and a white savior when John comes to get involved with Lenina, but it's not how it works in our society, because the thing that's interesting about our world is that even people in the lowest classes and the lowest castes of society, they still have access to social media. They still post on social media, and they often try to use the social media to get out of the lowest classes of society. People who show their lives living and surviving on food stamps, especially now with the situation in America, and people post from Ukraine, people post from Sudan, people post from Palestine. And those people, no matter how removed they are from the middle class and especially the upper class, they still have the access to this kind of main controlling force of our lives, and they try and participate in it.
You're absolutely right that in Brave New World, the actual lower class are like, they're not really given any entertainment. They're bred to be so simple, so unintelligent. They're sort of unable to participate in the pleasures. And I think to really hone in on what you're saying, and I'm interested in what the others think. In Brave New World, it's possible for Bernard and Lenina to travel great distances very quickly. And that mobility enables them to gain this perspective on the world and also see how similar the world is everywhere. I mean, this is also in Ian Forster's The Machine Stops, right? It's a dystopia where you can travel everywhere you want, anywhere in the world, underground or in these airships. And it's just the same everywhere,
But in Ian Forster's Machine Stops, you can travel anywhere you want, great distances in little to no time, but nobody wants to.
Yeah.
Because they're all in their little cells of comfort. And the idea that you would ever want to leave your cell of comfort is completely ludicrous to most people.
Yeah.
In fact, I would genuinely recommend The Machine Stops by Ian Forster. If you like Brave New World, that's definitely one to read.
If I can interject here, was talking to a couple of students about travel as part of the English class. And two of them had gone to a well-known place in the Gulf. I'm going to name the name. And it's very opulent, very wealthy. They said they didn't like it at all because it was just sort of like a playground for Western Europeans and wealthy Russians. And it wasn't at all going someplace else. It was simply a very opulent version of Western society. And that's very interesting, to go that great distance and yet really not go anywhere at all. And that sort of ties in with Brave New World. Everyone's traveling around to essentially the same place.
And just thinking about Nadia's point and that connection to the world we live in now, and I'm also thinking of the relevance of one of the other inspirations for the film that you mentioned, Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. We do live in a different world to that depicted in Brave New World, because although Huxley does really stress the power of communications technologies in that novel, he couldn't quite have anticipated just how like ultra connected we would be. And so this point is really interesting because not absolutely everyone has access to the internet. Certainly there's different tiers of access, but it's a really striking point that even people that are starving, people that are being bombarded with AI targeted cluster bombs and weaponry, even people who are literally dying, are still often able to log on to post on social media. Social media is like a net. It doesn't keep us safe, and it doesn't feed us, and it doesn't pay us, but it does connect us in this network where we're all made to feel part of the same community. And to bring it back to Follow Me, it's interesting the film doesn't depict the kind of class distinctions that you have in Brave New World, where it's such an obvious theme of it. And I'm assuming that's because you're not saying that class distinctions don't exist in the film, but you are saying that they're erased because we're all equal insofar as we can all point our phones at each other, and being given a phone is almost like a social welfare that everyone has access to, right?
I would say that that's a big part of it, but we also had different colored neural links. So there was some type of class system going on to identify who was on top, but it was mainly to signify that the giver, mother, and father were the ones that were superior, and they are the ones that you should listen to. And then you had a girl who was an influencer, and she was like the perfect picture that mother and father wanted her to be. And then there was the rest of the normal people that had yellow neural links that were just common. So I think we did try to eliminate a little bit of the class system to make it more of an importance that everyone has this addiction to their phone and everyone can find pleasure in their phone, which I think is pretty similar in Brave New World with the soma that they get, because even the workers can get the soma. And there's such a big relevance to phones because they both give us pleasure. So we put phones into the place of soma because when Guy comes into the world regularly, he gets given a phone, and then all of his worries are gone. And I think that was a pretty important part of the movie because it just shows that how involved we are with our phones and how much pleasure they give us and how much we rely on them for us to like be happy and have like a sense of relief in our day-to-day lives that we think we couldn't get without our phones.
So another point I think which we had was that we based the class system on how many likes and followers and how much social media reach somebody has. So Girl was very popular because she had a lot of reach because she was like a huge influencer in this world. And so therefore there was a class system, but it wasn't as obvious as I think other ones would be. So it was kind of underlying.
I find this language of influences, and I think someone mentioned earlier, parasocial relationships, really interesting as well, because I think that these are obviously hallmarks of our social media digital age, people who are able to be influencers through the algorithm. And then there are other people who believe that they have genuine relationships with those influencers, which are called parasocial relationships, where an influencer creates content and they put it out into the digisphere, and it's consumed by innumerable people who think that because they let this person's face and their voice into their own lives and into their own spaces, even into their own homes, and they feel like they have genuine relationships with these people, whereas actually they've never met them before. And it seems like a complete hallmark of the age in which we live. And so then I was thinking, in Follow Me, to what extent can anyone truly have a relationship with each other when it's couched in these terms?
Another thing that you can see throughout the movie is that when girl gets her phones repaired, her relationship with Guy kind of falls off immediately, and they have a big fight immediately because she's like not paying attention to him anymore, and this kind of other thing that she's really focusing on. And I think a big thing about Follow Me in general is like it has the similar eeriness that I think Brave New World has, because it is something that could happen in the future. There are parallels to our world right now, and I think we have to pay attention to that. And I think that's also something that makes it feel kind of creepy.
I wanted to ask you about this because I don't think we're that far away from forms of brain-computer interface being ubiquitous. I don't know if you've noticed the tendency for young children in airports or maybe even at home to have a tablet in front of them and then headphones on at the same time, so that all of their senses are then directed towards the digital entertainment, and thus they are basically interfacing with the computer. This is quite dystopian. If you go on a Neuralink website, you'll see a different story, which is this is a tool for people who are paraplegic. This is a tool for people who have no mobility to express themselves. And what I think you get really right in the film is people imagine technology becoming less and less ubiquitous, and kind of maybe once we have the Neuralinks, we don't need our phones. But I think by showing the fact you have this kind of relationship between the Neuralink and the phone, you actually get closer to what I was describing with being plugged in on all sides. How would you answer the idea that maybe we do need a technology like Neuralink, because there are people who have no other way of accessing the world than through a brain-computer interface? So is there a place for this kind of technology?
Nowadays, with AI, and specifically AI kind of generative technology, people make this argument that, oh, you can't get rid of AI art because what about disabled people? And it's very disturbing in the sense that disabled people actually have been involved in the spaces that you are trying to give them access to through this new destructive technology. I think it's technology that can very much be abused. It feels like a non-medical thing. It's not a hearing aid. There is so much space and opportunity for it to be abused by the big tech, for ads to be streamed through it, connection being cut once you stop paying a subscription fee, which happens with many technologies nowadays. Just recently, there's been a man who has cut off his Roomba from giving his information to the company that owns it, and they essentially detonated it. They stopped the software from working.
Yeah.
So I think Neuralink is not in the hands of the right people. It's not in the hands of the medical industry. It's in the hands of the tech industry. So I think whilst that statement stays true, we cannot trust this technology and we cannot implement this technology.
There's an interview between Aldous Huxley and Mike Wallace you can find on YouTube. And the question of technology comes up, and paraphrasing Huxley, he's saying people are going to use it. When technology becomes available, people are going to use it. And he's speaking to this very issue we're talking about now, that new technologies will be adapted for better and for worse. It's more or less enough.
And Mr. Huxley, right off the bat, let me ask you this. As you see it, Who and what are the enemies of freedom here in the United States?
Well, I don't think you can say who in the United States. I don't think there are any sinister persons deliberately trying to rob people of their freedom. But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes to use can use to accelerate this process of going away from freedom, of imposing control. Well, another force which I think is very strongly operative in this country is the force of what may be called over-organization. As technology becomes more and more complicated, it becomes necessary to have more and more elaborate organizations, more hierarchical organizations. And incidentally, the advance of technology has been accompanied by an advance in the science of organization. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before. And so that you have more and more people living their lives out as subordinates in these hierarchical systems controlled by bureaucracies, either the bureaucracies of big business or the bureaucracies of big government.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, the devices that you were talking about, are there specific devices or methods of communication which diminish our freedoms in addition to overpopulation and over-organization?
Well, there are certainly devices which can be used in this way. I mean, let us take, after all, a piece of very recent and very painful history is the propaganda used by Hitler, which was incredibly effective. I mean, what were Hitler's methods? Hitler used terror on the one kind, brute force on the one hand, but he also used a very efficient form of propaganda, which he was using every modern device at that time. He didn't have TV, but he had the radio, which he used to the fullest extent, and was able to impose his will on an immense mass of people. I mean, the Germans were a highly educated people.
Well, we're aware of all this, but how do you equate Hitler's use of propaganda with the way that propaganda, if you will, is used, let us say, here in the United States? Are you suggesting that there's a parallel?
Needless to say, it's not being used in this way now. But the point is, it seems to me, that there are methods at present available, methods superior in some respects to Hitler's method, which could be used in a bad situation. I mean, what I feel very strongly is that we mustn't be caught by surprise by our own advancing technology. This has happened again and again in history. Technology is advanced, and this changes social condition, and suddenly people have found themselves in a situation which they didn't foresee and doing all sorts of things they didn't really want to do.
Well, now, what do you mean? Do you mean that we develop our television, but we don't know how to use it correctly? Is that the point that you're making?
Well, at present, the television, I think, is being used quite harmlessly. It's being used, I think, I would feel it's being used too much to distract everybody all the time. But, I mean, imagine, which must be the situation in all communist countries, where the television, where it exists, is always saying the same thing the whole time, is always driving along. It's not creating a wide front of distraction. It's creating a one-pointed drumming in of a single idea all the time. It's obviously an immensely powerful instrument.
So you're talking about the potential misuse of the instrument.
Exactly. We have, of course, all technology is in itself morally neutral. These are just powers which can either be used well or ill. It's the same thing with atomic energy. We can either use it to blow ourselves up, or we can use it as a substitute for the coal and the oil which are running out.
I think to respond to that with what are we supposed to do about it, kind of remark, Huxley in his programmatic book Ends and Means, and also in the novel After Many a Summer, published around the same time, he makes the point that, exactly as you said, any technology is going to be used by central authority and power to do the worst possible stuff. And so you have to be careful when you're developing technology. How useful is it really if your technology is going to be used to do great harm? And the character who kind of represents some of his views in that book, After Many a Summer, then says, well, what about technologies that allow people to be more self-sustainable to people to grow their own food, or, small scale manufacturing. The character estimates that maybe 2/3 of all manufacturing could be done on a small scale. We could build our own stuff. We could make our own stuff.
Huxley's book, Brave New World Revisited, which I think is just brilliant. When he talks about how Adolf Hitler came to power, he immediately seized on this new technology of the microphone and the public address system and used it brilliantly to essentially strip everyone of their agency and to convince them subliminally that he was the path to their unmet fulfilled desires. And that's how he got them to follow him. But microphone in the PA system was essential. He couldn't have done it without it. And so he was a fast adapter in that regard, but it's rather sinister.
I'm currently in film school, and as part of our European cinema class, we looked in detail at Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, which is obviously, the ode to Hitler. And we have also looked at films of Sergei Eisenstein in the era where Bolshevism was climbing the ranks. And even back then, even, a literal 100 years back, before Brave New World even, media was such a powerful tool of influence and propaganda and it has only grown. There is no stopping it.
Yeah, this is a useful context, isn't it? The Nazis tried to build a system of public announcement speakers that would cover every part of Germany, every village, every town. They didn't fully succeed, but they actually wanted to broadcast group listening projects to everyone at the same time. And they described radio as being completely aligned with the National Socialist spirit, right? And I think it's so interesting because we kind of like to view these technologies around us as like social media as like neutral, right? As platforms that we can engage in, and there's a freedom to debate what we want. But there's something a bit more concerning about the fact that we can't disconnect. And in the film, you have this movement out into the forest, and this phrase of go out and touch the grass, is a bit of a cliche about how to disconnect. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to bring things to a close as we reflect on Aldous Huxley Now and Huxley Day. Having been through this experience of making the film about a world in which people cannot disconnect, how would you encourage people to disconnect? What do each of you personally do to try to disconnect and kind of reconnect with something that isn't technologically mediated?
I mean, I think it's very difficult for anyone, especially our age right now, to get away from their phones for longer than an hour, because we've been gotten so we're so relying on our phones. And it's just, even though after making the movie, I always tend to reach for my phone whenever I feel like I'm bored or whenever I need to research something. And it's just such a difficult thing nowadays because it's become so normalized. And what I tend to do is I think a very normal thing to do is I set time limits on my phone and screen time for my apps that I know I'm going to be on, so-called doom scrolling for a few hours. And I think the time limits, they tend to help, but they can still be turned off again. And it's just so important for me to just put down my phone for a while, maybe give it to my parents or something, and then do hobbies that I actually enjoy doing and that are productive, or just do my homework. Because for me, it's school first. So every time I feel like I'm not getting a good grade, I leave my phone and I go to the library and I go study. And I do that until I think that I've done everything that I can to get a good grade. And even after that, I feel so productive that I don't even want to touch my phone anymore. Because then you're in this mood where it keeps on going. And then I want to start drawing again. I want to play the piano again. And then once you get into that rhythm, it's actually really easy for me to not look at my phone as much. But then I do get so many messages that I'm then missing out on. And sometimes my friends even get a little bit annoyed that I'm not on my phone, because all of our communication is through the phone. And so it's difficult to find that balance. And I think if everyone would stop using their phones as much, the balance would be a little bit easier. But I don't think we're ever or soon going to get to that point because it's become so normalized.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult. It's even more of a tight spot for me because a lot of my assignments do rely on me using the technology, opening the editing software, getting my homework done. But I would say it's get involved with people. It's a very basic thing. It's very hard for some people to do, but I will always advocate for the power of the community. I will always advocate for going to a new kind of maybe a sewing class, a cooking class. I'm involved with a lot of societies in my university. So instead of going home after my lectures and plopping onto my bed and just scrolling on my phone, I will go to a discussion point, maybe a movie screening, maybe a pub crawl. Don't drink it. But it's so important to surround yourself with this support system of people that it will become much easier to let go of your phone and forget about your phone once you are surrounded by people who you actually want to talk to.
Yeah, I'd also say, like, this was said before, but I think finding a hobby is something that you really enjoy or something creative really helps me personally, because then I want to do that more than look at my phone. So it's like you really want to do that and you don't really enjoy spending time on your phone anymore. And so you can kind of find that balance and then go and do something else.
One of the most moving scenes to me in the film was in the forest, where a guy takes a girl to his parents. They're touching the grass, and it's alive, it's growing, it's the life of the forest. And that's like log off, touch grass. I didn't know if you were thinking about that, but everything around the society was glass and metal and cold and kind of dead in this little booth where mother is talking to girl, and they're going to get rid of all these things happen in this very tightly enclosed metal glass space. And the opening scene is in this very tight metal glass space, and other scenes also. But then here's this beautiful, expansive, green, lush forest scene. I thought it was a beautiful juxtaposition of those two worlds. I mean, bravo, it was so well done.
It's an amazing scene. It just remains to say thank you so much, Nadia, Lynn, Eva, and James, for participating in this special episode. I think it's a really appropriate message for Aldous Huxley Day and for the theme of what should we do now, to say now is a good time to figure out how you can disconnect. I'm aware of the irony of hearing this message probably encountered this on Instagram or Facebook or something, but nevertheless, it's a great message, right, to try to find your way to disconnect and following some of the advice that you've given us.
This is your signal to log off and touch grass.